Yes.
One, a motion to extend the lease on, with Jeremy Baldwin for Happy Creek Industrial Park for 1 year.
Do you want to make that motion?
Is there a motion?
Also move.
Second.
Harold.
Roll call, Brown
Harold, aye.
Jenkins, aye.
Martin, aye?
Wolf, aye.
eye. Motion passes. Is there a second one?
Yes, it's a motion to extend the lease with Cisco Corporation at 426 Bow Drive for 1 year.
Also move.
Second.
Harold seconds.
Roll call, Brown eye.
Harold, aye.
Jenkins, aye.
Martin, aye?
Wolf, aye.
That passes.
Okay.
Okay. Let's, I have just a very brief thing on executive committee administrative updates, as we have been talking with prospects about a variety of,
And I apologize, Mr. Chairman, I've got to run a shareholders meeting with
Yep.
people all around the country, so I have to leave.
yeah, he has to go in half an hour.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think we're gonna be done by then.
Okay.
My sincerest hope.
I don't think we discussed property. Let's see it.
Well, we're gonna discuss buckets,
Okay.
okay? Jim left on finance. He didn't have any updates particularly
Thank you, sweetie.
on it. I have sent you what the county has proposed on our upcoming budget. It's something for us to consider. I will note that we haven't been a party to any of the numbers involved. And hopefully we can resolve that issue. So the next would be the asset committee.
Sure. So, thanks, Jeff. Most of my stuff has been discussed in closed session, and that really pertains to the signing of the leases. And this next comment or this next report kind of translates into the disposition of property, and I can certainly talk about it at that point in time, or I can talk.
I was thinking that it would be good to come up under that.
Perfect. Then
If
I
you're
will, I
good.
will, I will wait for that then.
Okay. County administrator, do you have?
Just that, really, I don't have a report, but just that the county scheduled a budget hearing April 12th at 6 p.m., just so you're all aware of that. I don't have anything else to add.
12/16 for EDA's budget?
For, no, this is the entire county budget.
Okay.
So the EDA's portion, or the economic development portion is
Board of Supervisors, okay. Is this something where presentations are being made, or it's just a,
Matt, the finance director, he made a presentation the other evening when they authorized it for advertisement, so I assume he'll make something like that as well that evening. But it's public hearing, so people can come speak, departments can come speak.
okay? I don't have anything else on that. Okay, new business, disposition of property. What I wanted to do was we need both to update our property lists and to come in with a plan on how to dispose of our property. EDA has an interest in disposing its property to help reduce its debt. The county is obviously interested in not paying as much for EDA's debt. And this is a good time to be doing that. I wanted to talk today mostly about a plan over the course of the next month to put our properties into a variety of buckets, and I would like to have a discussion about the buckets that I came up with and see if we can come up with something. Everything that we do is going to be contingent on First Bank and Trust approval, and obviously working with the county on things that we do. We continue to have, where we can, a commitment to highest and best use for our properties. We're not commercial real estate brokers. We are here to promote economic development. So bringing in companies that bring in jobs, bringing in companies that will increase our tax base are the things that we're here, and we're trying to bring in businesses that are going to fit within our community. So with that in mind, I wanted to start a discussion about putting our properties into a variety of buckets. We have properties that really have a low return on investment in terms of time and money, our time and money. We, as an entity, don't truly have staff. We get about 5 to 10% of Joe's time right now until they bring on a planning director. They won't bring on an administrative assistant until Joe's on full time. So the county has been terrific on the finance side about relieving that burden from doing that. But we are still down and don't have significant staff to do a lot of things we might otherwise do. We have properties that, as we look at them, that aren't really suitable for industrial or commercial development. And what Jim had talked about, and I can fill you in to some degree on, is whether or not we want to take those lower end properties, and possibly a couple that are very attractive, and have an auction, both to raise money quickly and to understand that the properties either don't fit within our planning, which is industrial and commercial development, that those are ones that might go to an auction site. Jim's view of this is that you want to get an auction firm that can bring in a lot of interest from other places. You want to take 3 months, even longer, to promote the fact that we're having the auction and to build excitement for it, and sell off some of the properties that take up time and energy that we don't have and need to put towards them, and focus on the properties that really are going to be game changers for the county and for the town. So that would be one bucket. There are some that may fit into that. Second bucket is hiring a broker who has expertise internationally and with commercial properties. These would be high return on investment opportunities in complex situations. The FTech site comes to mind for that particular one. A brownfield where it's going to take a lot of work. There are a lot of stakeholders involved in it, and then finding the right kind of economic opportunity would be part and parcel with working with them, so that we would be looking for somebody who would be doing economic development there. The third category are properties that we have that need more work on our part, that we haven't put the time and effort into, and that we focus on them in the next 6 months to the end of this year, to get them ready so we know exactly what we're going to do with them and what we're going to and how we're going to proceed, what our plan is with it. The final one is there are lots of little pieces of property that, in essence, we're going to be stuck with. They either are not suitable for any development, or it's like it's just property that we can't basically sell. And with those, I would say either EDA keeps them or we deed them over to the county. and move from that regard. As we look at those 4 buckets, on some properties, we want to get appraisals. We have an appraisal ongoing right now that we'll have in the next week on Vaugh Drive. In talking with the county administrator, they will begin to do appraisals of other high priority projects. The 56 acres out at Stevens, Avtex, the Happy Creek Road property are ones that I had suggested might be high in things. We will need to update our properties on the website. And if we do something like an auction, that we'd want to highlight things on our website. We might want to consider, Silent Falcon offered for slightly less than $7 an acre to do a drone topographic overlay. If you recall, we talked about that several months ago. There wasn't money available to do that at that point, but that may be something to heighten the interest. The 53 acres at Stevens Industrial Park comes to mind for that. It's very difficult to go take a look at it by walking up it. You have to go up a burn, then there's tons of trees, but to have a group that does, and it's very impressive. I'm happy to bring it back. Quality product that Silent Falcon would give us a rate at 50% less than their normal commercial charges because they're here in the county. But to be able to give prospective buyers a real sense of what the topography of the property is, how it might be used, and to really understand every detail about the property. And they have about 9 different overlays of information that they would give somebody. So that's really where I wanted to focus on that. I don't know that it's, I think as a group we can go through and we don't have to do it today, nor would I suggest it. But I just want to make sure that the buckets that I'm talking about make sense to us, and that this is a plan that we can begin to talk about. There are obviously things that we have to do. If we decide to auction things, we absolutely have to have First Bank and Trust approve it, understanding that we're uncertain about what we're going to get for each individual property and so on. But to have a very specific plan about what it is that we do with these properties so that we can move ahead and expeditiously start to move the properties that we own.
Yeah, I would offer one other category.
Sure.
And that is that we talked with the county about are there any properties that the county would be interested in, either from a parks and recreation standpoint or from some other use standpoint. That if there's something that's not core to us that we don't see as really an economic development opportunity for that property.
Yeah.
But the county can envision some other use for it.
Yeah.
For the public good, rather than sell it for a small dollar amount. Would we be better suited turning that over for a new park?
I would, if I could just one thing, and then I'll come to you.
No.
I would enlarge that there may well be good public use. So it's part of the Avtex side, on the other side of the river.
That's
So
what
I was gonna say,
Yeah.
the 80,
Yeah.
the 80 camping
that
sites
west
over
side
there.
of the river.
And there's some tiny ones that are again, that are worthless. But there's a couple that are sizable, several acres, and may will be turnable.
I have that side of the river, particularly
Yeah.
mine, as I think about
That's exactly what I was thinking. That site over there would be perfect for
Right.
camping and all of
Right.
that. And that, so is our homework to go back through this list and come back with what buckets we think
Yes.
each property should be in? Is that where you want us to go?
That's where I want to go.
Okay.
Does everybody know how to use the GIS site to identify these properties?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would note that the Remount Road, the Zero Remount Road property is actually the Royal Lane.
Is the, okay,
Yeah.
that's what I thought.
So you're probably not gonna find it if you type in the Zero Remount Road.
It's good. I actually had a question as to which the heck that one was, so it's good to know in it. Now, there are, let me just do a quick update here. We no longer have the McKay Springs property that was given back to the county, and this does not include the list that we have. We need to update it, and that'll be part of this process. But we need to add in the Happy Creek Road property that we got in litigation, the house and the 42 acres.
Is that on here or not?
No.
Yes, it is not on here.
Not on
We have to add it.
Right.
But I thought we'd start with this. You know, we have, even now several years old, you know, we're sitting with assessed value of properties, and some of it is speculative in the utmost because it's not buildable land. Still, a price was assigned to it. Well, let's say in the neighborhood of $30 million of properties that we have. And that can do a lot as we sell them, again, highest and best use and for economic development. For as many of them as we can, that can do a lot to reduce the debt that the county has been paying. Is there any other business that comes before the board?
Yes, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
If we can go back, I believe there were some disclosures that people wanted to make in conjunction with the Cisco extension.
Yes.
Very good. Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you, Sharon. Were you sending me language for that, Ms. Sharon, or do I need to just state?
Well, let me just phrase it this way. I am sending you a form which you can file, Ms. Martin. Basically, you are declaring that you have a financial interest in Cisco Corporation, but it is not such that you are disqualified, and therefore you are declaring it, and you can vote on the matter objectively in the public interest.
That is correct.
Greg?
Yeah, I, Greg Harold, have a financial interest in Cisco as well, and my stock holdings do not prevent me from objectively voting on any matters as it relates to the Cisco lease on Ball Drive.
Thank you.
One thing that I left out, Greg has put together a piece about the property across the street from 400 Kendrick Lane, which is the truck driving school. And I think it's appropriate and public that we talk about that, and then we can elaborate on it as we move through the properties and our plans for each one of them. So, Greg, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. So, probably about a year and a half ago, Jeff and I met with a couple of individuals, or one individual specific, I think it was two individuals, regarding limited equity housing corporations.
Yeah.
It was a gentleman from the House of Hope, and then maybe from the Shenandoah Valley Housing Authority. There were two individuals, and the names escape me, so forgive me in that regard. And also, in full disclosure, I was approached about a year ago from another local group regarding this property, presenting this idea. So, you know, all credit to that as well. But what I'm going to present as well today is just a little bit different, but it kind of tag teams on those previous discussions that I've had with certain stakeholders in the community. One of the things that this community is being faced with, as many communities, is a shortage of affordable housing. There's been a lot of pressure in the markets as it relates to material prices, suitable land availability, and what you're seeing now, and quite honestly, a shortage of housing stock. And what you're seeing now is houses that are just being escalated in the market by bidding wars. I'm experiencing this personally. And it puts young families, all families, I should say, in a real big bind in wanting to stay in this area and build their lives when they cannot find and or build suitable housing for themselves and or their families, no matter what shape or form they look like. So I've been kind of racking my brain and trying to understand, what can the EDA do as an entity that operates both in the town and the county in alleviating or helping to remediate this problem. Granted, housing is not one of our primary objectives, but housing is a very important objective as it relates to economic development. Because when companies come in, they're going to be bringing in employees, and or they're going to be having employees that are going to be elevated in financial stature, and they're going to need a place to live. They're going to need a first-time place to live, or they're going to want to move up. And there just is not enough in this area as it relates to available housing units and or lots that are suitable for that. Now, there's a tremendous amount of opportunity out in Happy Creek as it relates to available building lots. I know there's some very large parcels out there which have probably 1,000 plus housing units approved on the books. However, due to costs beyond these developers' ability, it's sometimes just not feasible to begin developing those properties. It could be site improvement costs as it relates to getting infrastructure in. It could be just raw materials costs now with builders trying to build structures at an affordable level. So we're really at a perfect storm of having a real much bigger problem than what we have right now. So that being said, I've looked at some opportunity on the site across from Kendrick Lane, which technically is on the Avtex property, but it's across the street from the major industrial area. And that might be a suitable property for a limited equity housing corporation to build and or develop some type of affordable housing. I have to believe that when the police department was built across from Monroe Avenue in Kendrick, that a phase 1 study was done. And that's directly adjacent to the Kendrick Lane property.
Yeah.
So ideally, whatever came up in that phase 1 study as it relates to environmental issues would probably apply to the Kendrick Lane property as well.
That particular parcel, when the EPA did it, and I think when you were, that property is totally clean.
Okay.
I mean, totally clean. There was no issues at all.
So that's good news. The other issue with that, and these are, I'm talking in very broad terms right now, the other issue with that property is changing the covenants or getting an exception or a variance to the covenants that the EPA has on that specific property and applying only to that one particular parcel right now, to seeing what the appetite is from the EPA for opening that file up again and looking at that and what restrictions and or what testing or what diligence we might need to go through to start pursuing that as an avenue for a viable residential property. So that being said, what I've done is I have taken a plan of the Kendrick Lane, and everybody can gather around and look at it if they like. The property is about 4.5 acres. Right now, it sits on the corner, it sits on the intersection of Kendrick Lane and Monroe Avenue. We have the old EDA offices right across the street here. You can see the nearby zoning. Directly behind it, we have a mix of zoning, unfortunately. We do have a C1, which has a series of small shops, convenience, and restaurants. We have R3 in the back as well, which is a higher density residential. We have R3 over to the right, and then we have an industrial section right here as well. Okay, so we have a little bit of a hodgepodge of zoning. So when we're looking at zoning as it relates to residential, we kind of look at, all right, well, what is actually going to fit in here? I really doubt that a high industrial use on this 4 acres is really going to be feasible. A, because the site is just too narrow in depth, okay, for anything really substantial. The other factor is that you have a lot of residences backing up to this area. I would like to believe that they would prefer to see something more in line with their current use rather than an industrial use directly in their backyard.
Yeah.
So from my standpoint, it makes sense to try to reposition this property into a residentially zoned parcel. What level of residential zoning that is, that's really up to the town of Front Royal and the EDA and the stakeholders in making that presentation to them. Okay, so there's going to be a lot of people involved in this process. But what I've done is I've basically have taken a map from the GIS site and I've scaled everything out. I have some special software at work that I've done this with. And based upon reading the town code, taking the dimensions, and taking a typical townhome plan, I've been able to map what I feel right now at this point at a very high level what we can obtain from this property. So as I said, a possible proposal might be an R3 zoning, which is neighborhood consistent with what we have behind it. Feasibly, we could get 40 townhome units in this section right here. It would be 5 buildings of 8 units each. Now, I believe that the town zoning code says that you can't have more than 8 units per townhome building. Okay, so if we look at the actual number here, I have 40 units. I have 8 units per 5 buildings in this area. They would have to be 2-level. The current zoning code doesn't allow anything for over 35 feet. So when you take a 3-level townhome, when you factor in the roof pitch, you're going to be over that amount. So it looks like right now, per the current code, we would have to limit ourselves to something 2 or 2.5 level on this particular parcel. Again, the zoning requirements for townhome development in the town of Front Royal is nothing smaller than 20 feet wide. So all of these units on this plan here are represented as being 20 feet wide.
What's the square footage? I'm sorry to interrupt. What's the square footage per unit?
Absolutely. I have projected in here, it's got roughly around 1,300 square feet
Okay.
per unit.
Okay.
Okay. Now, under the townhome zoning, under R3 zoning, you're required to set aside community space. And that's what I show on the far right here. In that area right here is the public green space, and that's about 15,000 square feet. Okay, so that satisfies that particular requirement. 15,000 square feet for community space is pretty nice. You could put a playground in here, you could put a dog walking park in here, whatever the case may be. There's a lot of opportunity to put in this area. But the site does have the space and it does have the capacity to support that level of green space. Currently there are 3 access points, one off of Kendrick Road and one off Monroe Avenue. Obviously there is visitor flow parking. Each one of these townhomes would propose to have 2 parking spaces per unit, obviously, and then you have overflow visitor parking as well, as I'm showing on here. And then of course we'd have an access road coming off of Kendrick, so you'd actually have an access road within the community to actually enter into the home or into the additional parking. And you could enter in any point on several points on Kendrick, and you could actually exit out on Monroe Avenue.
Now, would these be private roads part of the LEC? Is that what you're saying, that's gonna, because this is set up just like an HOA?
Exactly.
It's exactly an HOA,
Exactly.
so you're looking at, I mean, it's actually a cooperative is what
It's
they
a
have.
it's a condo.
Yeah, so it's a condo cooperative, which is what I manage.
Yep.
So, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So that depends on whether that remains private or not, would determine whether we build it to the state specifications.
State specifications or not, because
Exactly.
frankly, for 1,300 square feet for 40, the bottom line is if you can offload that road, that it's gonna be state or, town maintained, these folks can't afford it. Frankly, they can't afford to maintain that road and all of that.
Sure.
I mean, it just comes down to numbers of what you're paying every month.
So what we have here is I've shown it as being a 30-foot wide road, which meets the criteria
Okay.
as it relates to the neighborhood requirements and the city streets.
Okay.
So there's plenty of room on the site.
Parking area that they have to maintain.
Yeah, and of course I have some notations on the back here. The BRL, the minimum requirement for rear yards is 40 feet. So we
Okay.
meet that requirement. We meet the front set yard requirement, the setback requirements, and we meet the side yard requirements between buildings as well. The areas between the buildings could theoretically be used as potential stormwater management.
Okay.
I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. I've got 4 or 5 areas designated for those if that's required. Utilities are located at the site, so tying into the sewer, tying into the storm, electrical cable right at the site is a very high beneficial use for the community, obviously. And then everybody knows that this is a very level lot, so the site improvement costs on this are very minimal. Okay, so this area right here is currently impervious. So by improving it, you're actually going to improve the stormwater management of it, because you'll actually have grass areas in here, and you'll actually have facilities in here to manage that.
The area behind it is sloped, if I'm remembering correctly.
It's not too much.
Or is it flat?
Yeah,
It
it's
might be a
pretty
little
level.
berm, but not much.
Yeah, it's a little bit.
Pretty flat, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
I was thinking those yards.
So, anyways, this is really just a high-level concept plan. This is just a few hours of me on the computer, kind of mapping things out to actually see if it would actually work. And from the space requirement, it appears to work. Whether you can actually get more units in here or not would really be up to a civil engineer to determine. But just based upon my analysis, I think we could easily get 40 units in here. Okay, so now that you get 40 units in here, what are you going to do with it? Okay, well, the idea of developing this, and to make things clear, the EDA realizes nothing, or basically essentially nothing, from the sale of this property. Okay, this all goes back to FMC.
Right.
Okay, so whether we sell it for $200,000 at market value, or $260,000 at market value, or we sell it at 1.5, okay, it doesn't come to us.
Right.
Very little of it does.
Very little, 10%
Yeah.
of that. I think we have a threshold that we have to meet.
Yeah, we have to pay back.
2 million, the first 2 million gets paid back in full, and then we
Right,
take 10%.
and then you take 10%.
Yeah.
Right.
So we're going to realize really nothing from the sale of this. So if we're going to realize nothing from the sale of this, and we're not going to be able to pay down our debts from the sale of this, let's turn it around and let's do something good for the community.
Right.
Okay, let's improve the housing stock. Well, how do we do that? We're not home builders. We're not developers. We are economic development agents of the community. So, and how do you keep it affordable? What's going to keep this, if we basically sell this at market, which is very, very valuable property. $267,000 is far below what the development value of this property could be. How do you retain that value so you can actually give back to the community? And one mechanism of doing that is by forming a limited equity housing cooperative. And basically what this means is that instead of, Jory, you coming in and buying a home fee simple, you actually buy a share in the limited housing corporation, or the limited equity housing corporation. And your share would be equivalent to the market price.
Right here?
Sharon, you there?
Yeah, I mean,
No.
it's basically a
I can
cooperative.
barely hear you all. I don't know whether.
Oh, we covered you up.
Sharon, can you hear us now?
We covered you up, Sharon.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. I need to tell you all that I've got to get off.
That's fine.
Okay. So why don't
But
we?
I wanted to say that I have actually, some weeks ago, I did contact the attorney at Interior about asking whether they had a list of things we could do and not do, just not the covenant. And I haven't heard back from them. They're usually a very slow response on things because they're busy with other matters, but I'll contact her again.
Sharon, I'm remiss. I have that list, or at least the oldest list. I'll send it to you.
No, I was asking her for an updated
Oh,
list, if
okay.
they had anything they were using as kind of a crib sheet.
Oh, okay.
That's why I was trying to see if we could get something that was more recent, cause them maybe to reflect on where this whole thing was.
Oh, good. Okay.
I that was kind of my mindset in doing that. So, and then maybe we could get together for a meeting amongst some of us to talk about it. But I'll follow up with Lauren again.
That'd be great.
Yeah. Sharon, it's fine if you go. I think we can end the meeting, adjourn it without you. So.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No problem.
Greg, I've got
Thanks, Sharon.
I've got a question because I want to hear where you were going just a minute
Absolutely.
ago. How do we keep it affordable?
Excellent question. So that is the benefit of a limited equity housing cooperative. What happens is you buy a share into it, okay, and your share price may be maybe the market price, or maybe the purchase price that's determined. Say these units want to sell for $200,000. Your share price is your share price into the corporation is $200,000. What happens is a nonprofit actually manages or manages this this corporation.
Okay.
You actually have deeded restrictions which state that your appreciation can only be tied to maybe the consumer price index or the rate of inflation or whatever the case may be. That's up to the board and up to the corporation to determine how the return on the equity is going to be given back to a participant. So if you want to buy a home and it costs $200,000, that's your share price. In 3 years you want to sell it. Well, based upon that sale price, it can be based upon or pegged at the inflation rate or the CPI or whatever index is determined. Maybe it's 4%. Okay, that will be what you were able to sell your share for, is your purchase price plus that
But as
percentage.
a first-time buyer, I don't have $200,000.
Okay,
So
that's okay.
where does the
You have-
the financing come from?
You have limited equity housing cooperatives that you have lenders that actually
They deal in this market.
deal in this only. You typically find this in very large cities where the cost of living is just astronomical.
Yeah.
In New York City, in Boston, and San Francisco. So they are very, very common up in the Northeast. And they are actually, if you go over to page 3 in my little handout here.
Do we need to also, if we're going to go this route, would we also need to recruit the financing side of it to make sure that there is financing available
Absolutely.
for people?
Absolutely.
And how do we put restrictions on it based on income to make sure that only those who need affordable housing are moving here? Or do we leave it open to anybody?
Okay, so that's really getting into the weeds.
Sorry to jump ahead. but
That's okay. I like the enthusiasm.
But that
I'm just trying to
actually,
understand how this
Absolutely.
works.
but they actually set the criteria.
Exactly.
The corporation sets the criteria for how this works, and you literally have bylaws, article of incorporate, actually it isn't called, I don't think, articles of incorporation, but it is I've managed 2 cooperatives. Now, they weren't this kind of cooperative. You could sell your shares for what you wanted to sell them for. It was down on Connecticut Avenue. But it's a good concept. It's just a question of whether this, and I think it is, but is this a use that is appropriate for across from where we're going to develop? And it ties all into the same plan. And, this may be appropriate for another location in Front Royal as opposed to here, but I think this is a great idea.
So, one of the benefits of a structure like this is that you can set the parameters by which you sell to.
Yeah.
Obviously, they can't be based upon a discriminatory basis, but they can be, if you want to say, the limited housing corporation is only eligible or only open to residents of Front Royal, Warren County, you can certainly do that. If you want to, and you can actually offer set-asides. And what I mean by a set-aside is the corporation can say, okay, we're going to set aside X amount of units only for public employees. You can absolutely do that. So,
Because if the intent is affordable housing, you want to target that housing at those who need it,
correct.
not those who don't need it.
Correct. Yes, that is one of the benefits of this type of structure.
Okay.
It's very controlled. It allows people to get into a residence, and granted, they're not going to profit off of wild market fluctuations that you might have in an area, but it otherwise allows them to get into a home that they otherwise would not be able to get into. And it keeps the housing stock at an affordable level.
Right.
And that's what the primary objective is.
And they will see some appreciation.
They will see some appreciation.
So if they want to move,
Right.
up.
Exactly. So the benefits of this particular site is A, that we own it, okay? B, that there's very limited opportunity cost. This is not like we're selling Happy Creek, at a discount. This strictly is whatever money that we pull from this goes directly to FMC up
Right.
until we meet that $2 million threshold from that standpoint. C, it satisfies a community need from that standpoint. D, it ensures a stable supply of affordable housing units, which is something that this community currently does not have or does not have enough of. E, you can do set-asides, as I mentioned, maybe for county employees or municipal employees, or however you want to designate that from that standpoint. And you can also engage local stakeholders such as local builders for this. So instead of selling this parcel off to a larger GC that doesn't really have a large stake in the community or in the area to come in and blow these things out, or maybe a corporate entity from coming in and just blowing these things out and taking their profits and then leaving, okay, you can enlist, a group of local home builders, that can build these, per very defined plans and specs. And then, of course, you're spreading the wealth around the local building community, okay, which supports the community, obviously, and it supports the residents of the community by providing another housing option.
Yeah. This is the kind of thing that I want to do as we are focusing on the individual properties. It may not be this sophisticated. By the way, it's a terrific presentation, Greg. Thank you for doing it. But this is what we want to do as we begin to look at our properties and how we want to dispose of them. And this seems to me to be a perfect example of something that, with more research, we have a lot of stakeholders involved in this particular thing. I have EDA, FREDA, town, county, EPA, FMC, residents, and there's probably more there. There's also opportunities of things that we've talked about in the past. The number one priority of People Inc., for example, is this type of housing. And then Greg and I, gosh, it's been, a year ago, we talked to that co-op that was very interested in pursuing it. We just didn't have the ability to deal with it. But this is the kind of thing where, as we look at our plans, we want to come in with a plan for each and what we do with them, dispose of the properties that we think we can't really do much in terms of highest and best use, and then focus on the ones that we can make a real difference in the community. So it's a terrific starting point for this.
Yeah, so the ask of this really is, as we decide to bucket or how we bucket these properties, we need a group consensus. Is this something that has some traction? And is this something that we want to pursue in some fashion? Is really the ask of the board.
Yeah.
So
Good. All right. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Harold seconds.
All right.
Roll call. Brown, aye.
Harold, aye.
Jenkins, aye.
Martin, aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you all so much for coming, and
Scott, and you seconded, right? Yeah.
Yep.
thank you all very much.